Welcome to the Future of Us Bookcast, your gateway to insights shaping our AI future.
Today we're getting into a really fascinating and I think quite challenging book.
Absolutely. We're looking at Antifragile, Things That Game from Disorder by Nassim Nicholas Taleb.
Yeah, this isn't just another book for him. He considers it his central work. It's really the culmination of his Inserto series on randomness and uncertainty.
And it's interesting because he's not just an academic thinker here, is he?
Not at all. He's blending his practical experience, as a trader dealing with volatility, with some really deep philosophical thinking. It's kind of a roadmap for making decisions when things are, well, fundamentally murky.
When you just don't know what's coming next, which feels very relevant right now.
Totally.
Huh.
And the core idea, the big one, is his concept he had to invent a word for: anti-fragility.
Right. We all know fragile. You drop it, it breaks. Easy.
And we know robust, too. Things that resist stress, that are tough. Like a brick wall, maybe.
But anti-fragile.
Yeah.
That's something else entirely.
It really is. It's about things that don't just resist shocks or volatility or randomness. They actually get better from it. They thrive on disorder.
Which is such a counterintuitive idea. How can chaos make something stronger?
Well, that's what the book unpacks. And it argues that, a lot of what we think drives success, like big scientific plans or top-down economic strategies, might actually be secondary. He says real progress often comes from, and I'm quoting here, anti-fragility exploited by risk takers in the form of tinkering and trial and error.
Wow. So not the carefully planned stuff, but the messy experimental stuff.
Exactly. It really flips the script on how we think about innovation, stability, even resilience.
So if you're out there feeling like you constantly have to predict the future, this book offers a different path.
It really does. It's about changing your structure, your approach, so that disorder helps you instead of hurt you.
Okay, I'm hooked. This sounds like it could change how you look at almost everything. Let's dive in.
All right, so first things first. If we're going to talk about dealing with uncertainty, we need the right language.
I need the concepts.
Exactly. And the main goal of this first part of the book is really to lay down that foundation, starting with this idea he calls the triad.
The triad. Okay, what is that?
It's basically a way to classify anything, an object, a system, an organism, based on how it reacts to shocks and volatility. It's simple, but really powerful.
So 3 categories?
3 categories. First up, the fragile. These are the things hurt by disorder, things that break under stress.
Like the classic example, the package stamped fragile handle with care.
Perfect example. Or a complex, super optimized supply chain. Any randomness throws it off. Volatility is its enemy.
Okay, that makes sense. What's next?
Next is the robust or resilient. These are things we usually admire, right?
Yeah.
They can take a hit.
They resist the stress.
They resist it, yeah. They don't necessarily improve, but they don't break either. They absorb the shock and kind of bounce back to where they were. The package might just say solid.
So like a bridge built to withstand strong winds, it holds up.
Exactly. That's what a lot of modern engineering aims for: robustness.
And the third one? The star of the show.
The anti-fragile. This is the category that didn't really have a common word, which is why Taleb had to coin it.
And these things benefit from shocks.
They benefit. They gain from disorder, from stress, even from trauma, up to a point, of course. The package here wouldn't just say solid.
It would.
It might say, please mishandle or handle carelessly, because the stress actually makes it better, stronger, provides useful information.
That's wild. So the opposite of fragile isn't robust, it's anti-fragile.
Precisely. We often confuse them, thinking not breaking is the opposite. But the true opposite has to gain from what hurts the fragile.
Okay, so this triad, fragile, robust, anti-fragile, this is the lens we're using.
It's the core lens, and it's especially useful when thinking about those huge, unpredictable events Taleb is famous for writing about. The black swan.
Ah, yes, the black swans. Remind us what those are again.
So a black swan is a large-scale event that's completely unpredictable to a specific observer, has a massive impact, and then after the fact, we concoct explanations to make it seem like it could have been predicted.
Right. Like the 2008 financial crisis, maybe?
Yeah.
Or the rise of the internet?
Those are often cited examples, yeah. And the classic metaphor for the victim of a black swan, the one who gets harmed because they assumed predictability.
Is the turkey.
The poor turkey, fed every day for 1,000 days, becomes more and more confident that humans are benevolent and life is stable.
Until day 1001.
Until Thanksgiving. A massive negative surprise from the turkey's perspective.
And the scary part is we humans fall for that kind of thinking all the time.
Constantly.
Yeah.
We built some models based on the everyday, the average, the mediocristan, as Taleb calls it. But history-changing events, the really big stuff, often comes from Extremistan, the realm of black swans.
So the book isn't about predicting these black swans.
No, it argues that's impossible, maybe even foolish to try.
Yeah.
It's about managing our exposure to them by understanding fragility and anti-fragility.
Got it. And he uses some other metaphors too, right? Like Damocles.
Yeah, the story of Damocles, the courtier who gets to sit the king's feast, living the high life.
But there's a catch.
A big catch. A sword hanging over his head, suspended by a single horse's hair. That represents hidden, nonlinear risk. He's fragile because it's only a matter of time before that hair breaks. The potential downside is catastrophic.
A very vivid image of fragility. And what about hormesis? That sounds medical.
It comes from pharmacology, yeah. Hormesis is this idea where a tiny dose of something harmful can actually be beneficial.
Like a vaccine. A tiny bit of the pathogen triggers the immune response.
Exactly. Or maybe allergy treatments. Small exposures build tolerance. It shows that stress, in the right dose, can strengthen a system.
So avoiding all stress makes us fragile.
That's a key argument. Depriving a system of necessary stressors, like maybe shielding kids from every single germ, can paradoxically make it weaker, more vulnerable when a real challenge comes along. The road to robustness, and even anti-fragility, often starts with a little bit of managed harm.
Okay, so this first book sets the stage, defines the terms, introduces the core problem of black swans and fragility. What's the main takeaway mission here?
The core mission is really this. Stop trying to predict the unpredictable. Focus instead on identifying and managing fragility.
Because fragility is easier to spot than predicting when the black swan will land.
Much easier. You can assess how a system reacts to small shocks now. And the book argues that while nature often tends towards anti-fragility, thriving in volatile environments.
Modernity does the opposite.
Modernity, with its large-scale planning, centralization, and obsession with smoothing out all the bumps, actually increases systemic fragility. It swaps natural, manageable volatility, mediocristan, for periods of artificial calm, followed by massive, devastating blow-ups, Extremistan.
That's a powerful critique. So let's nail down the key points from book one.
Okay, key takeaways. First, anti-fragility is the property of gaining from disorder, chaos, and stress.
Got it.
Second, focus on detecting fragility using the triad don't get lost trying to predict the timing or nature of black swans.
Makes sense.
And third, be aware that modernity's push for stability often masks growing risks, replacing healthy natural volatility with the potential for huge, infrequent crashes.
All right, so if modern life pushes us towards fragility, but anti-fragility is the goal, how do we actually get there? How do we build things that benefit from chaos?
That's exactly what Book 3 starts to tackle. It gets into the practical mechanics, focusing on this crucial concept of asymmetry.
Asymmetry, meaning unbalanced.
Exactly. Having more potential upside than potential downside. That's the fundamental mathematical engine behind anti-fragility.
How so?
Well, think about it. If you're in a situation where volatility happens, and if things go well, you gain a lot, but if things go badly, you only lose a little?
Then over time, the volatility actually works in your favor.
Precisely. Volatility becomes your friend as long as you're structured correctly. The key is making sure you don't pay too much for that exposure, that potential upside.
Okay, and he uses a historical figure to illustrate this asymmetry idea, right? Seneca.
Yeah, the Roman Stoic philosopher Seneca. But not maybe the version of Stoicism everyone thinks of.
What do you mean? I thought Stoicism was all about being robust, enduring hardship, suppressing emotions, being indifferent to outcomes.
That's the common picture, aiming for robustness, insulating yourself from any downside. But Seneca, the actual historical figure, was incredibly wealthy. And he kept his wealth.
Which seems not very stoic. Like, shouldn't he have given it all away to be truly detached?
Well, Taleb argues Seneca's approach was actually masterclass in practical anti-fragility, not just robustness. He calls it anti-fragility from fate.
Okay, unpack that.
Seneca worked hard to achieve robustness on the emotional side. He trained himself so that if he lost his wealth, Lady Fortuna couldn't truly harm his inner peace. He aims for no downside emotionally. But crucially, he kept the upside the wealth offered, the influence, the options, the comfort. He didn't throw away the potential benefits.
So he protected himself from the pain of loss, but kept the potential for gain. That is asymmetrical.
Exactly. And he justified it with this really sharp observation about wealth.
Let's hear that quote.
He said, "Wealth is the slave of the wise man and master of the fool."
So the fool is fragile because his identity is tied to his wealth. Losing it destroys him.
Right. He's mastered by it. But the wise man, Seneca implies, remains emotionally robust to the loss. Wealth is just a tool, a slave, that offers upside potential, but its loss doesn't break the master.
That's a really different take on Stoicism. It's not about total detachment, but about managing the downside while keeping the upside open.
It's about calculated asymmetry. Strength isn't necessarily denying the benefit, it's denying the dependency on it, denying its ability to cause you deep harm.
Okay, so if asymmetry is the goal, limited downside, big potential upside, how do you actually achieve that in practice?
This leads directly to probably the most famous practical concept from the book, the barbell strategy.
The barbell, like weights in a gym.
Exactly like that image, a bar with weights concentrated at the two extremes and nothing much in the middle.
So it's a strategy of extremes.
Yes. It avoids what Taleb calls the fragile corruption of the middle. That middle ground of moderate risk, he argues, is often where hidden dangers lurk, where risks aren't obvious, where systems seem stable but are actually prone to sudden collapse.
So instead of taking medium risks,
You combine extreme safety with extreme risk-taking. It sounds paradoxical, but it's designed to exploit that asymmetry we just talked about.
how does it work?
The absolute first step, always, is to dramatically decrease your downside. Eliminate the risk of ruin, the possibility of a negative black swan taking you out completely.
Protect yourself from catastrophe first.
Always. Once you've done that, once you've minimized the potential harm, then you can afford to take big swings for the upside with a separate part of your strategy or resources. You let the natural anti-fragility, the potential for large positive surprises, work for you.
Okay, give me a real-life example. How would you barbell your personal life?
The book suggests becoming almost paranoid about things that can cause irreversible harm, terminal risks, like avoiding smoking, excessive sugar, maybe dangerous hobbies like motorcycling without extreme precautions, avoiding sketchy situations or risky financial leverage that could wipe you out. You basically eliminate anything that has a small but non-zero chance of absolute ruin.
Okay, so extreme caution on the things that can end the game.
Right. And because you've secured that baseline safety, you can then be much more aggressive and risk-seeking in other areas where the consequences of failure are limited.
Like your career choices.
Yeah.
Or maybe small investments.
Exactly. Taking a chance on a new project, starting a side hustle, investing a small amount in something highly speculative. If it fails, it stings, but it doesn't destroy you. If it succeeds, the upside could be huge.
And this applies directly to finance, obviously.
Hugely. The classic financial barbell is putting, say, 85–90% of your capital into extremely safe assets like government bonds, something inflation protected, where the chance of major loss is near zero.
Okay, that's the safety end of the barbell.
That's the safety end. Then, with the remaining 10–15%, you don't go for medium risk stocks. You go for highly speculative ventures, maybe angel investing, options, things with potentially explosive, nonlinear upside.
Because even if that whole 10–15% goes to zero,
They're still fine. Your core capital is safe. You've removed the risk of ruin, which Taleb argues is the most important step. He quotes Ray Dalio's rule: make sure that the probability of the unacceptable, i.e. the risk of ruin, is nil.
avoid the middle, play the extremes. It's a very different way of thinking about risk.
It really is. And he illustrates this with a great comparison between two jobs that seem to have different levels of security.
Ah, the London cab driver versus his brother John.
Exactly. The self-employed cab driver has a very volatile income. Some days are great, some are terrible. He's constantly dealing with small stresses, traffic jams, difficult customers. It looks insecure.
Compared to his brother John, who has a steady salary, maybe a corporate job, looks much more secure.
Right. John's income is smooth, predictable, until it isn't. His stability is kind of artificial. He's vulnerable to one big shock downsizing, a bad performance review, his whole industry shifting. That one event could be catastrophic and permanent.
Whereas the cab driver,
The cab driver's daily volatility is actually information. It forces him to adapt constantly. A bad day is quickly forgotten. A mistake doesn't go on some permanent record. He's being tested and strengthened by the small stresses.
so the cabbie is actually more robust, maybe even anti-fragile, because he's exposed to constant low-level randomness.
That's the argument. John's pseudo-stability makes him fragile to the big, unexpected hit. The driver's volatility gives him a form of security through constant adaptation. Randomness isn't inherently bad. It's bad for the fragile.
Okay, this section really provides a practical toolkit. Let's sum up Book 3.
The main path to anti-fragility is building asymmetry into your life and systems. Structure things so the potential gains vastly outweigh potential losses, especially from those rare big events.
And the barbell strategy is the way to do it.
It's the key practical method. Embrace extremes. Extreme safety combined with extreme calculated risk-taking.
So the key takeaways.
All right, from book 3, antifragility fundamentally means having more upside than downside. That's the core asymmetry.
Got it.
The barbell strategy is the practical way to achieve this. Combine extreme safety with extreme speculation, avoid the fragile middle,
Makes sense.
and, crucially, always decrease downside risk first, especially the risk of ruin. Protect yourself from the catastrophe, then let the upside potential take care of itself.
Okay, we've got the concept of asymmetry and the barbell strategy. But where does that upside potential actually come from, especially at the really big unexpected wins?
That's where Book 4 comes in, focusing on optionality. This section argues that optionality is the engine driving anti-fragility, and that most real progress doesn't come from neat top-down plans, but from messy, bottom-up trial and error.
Optionality, like having options.
Exactly, but defined very specifically here. An option is essentially asymmetry plus rationality. It's having the right, but crucially not the obligation, to do something.
So you can benefit if things go well, but you're not forced to suffer if they go badly.
Precisely. You capture the potential upside while your downside is limited, often just to the cost of acquiring the option itself.
And the classic story illustrating this is Thales, the philosopher.
Thales of Miletus, yeah. The story goes he was mocked for being a poor philosopher, so he decided to prove a point.
What did he do?
Using his knowledge, perhaps of astronomy or weather patterns, he anticipated a huge olive harvest coming. But instead of just predicting it,
He did something clever.
much cleverer. During the off-season, when demand was low, he cheaply bought the rights, the option to use all the olive presses in the region.
So he didn't buy the presses themselves?
No, just the right to use them. He paid a small deposit, securing the option. When the massive harvest arrived, everyone needed the presses, and Thales controlled the supply. He rented them out at a huge profit.
Making a fortune and proving philosophers could be rich if they wanted to.
Right. But Taleb points out that Aristotle, who told this story, kind of missed the most important part. Aristotle focused on Thales' ability to predict the harvest. But the real genius was the structure of the bet. Thales didn't need a perfect prediction.
He just needed the harvest to be big enough to make his option valuable.
Exactly. His potential loss was strictly limited to the small amount he paid for the option. His potential gain was massive and uncapped, tied to the unpredictable size of the harvest. He bought a cheap option on volatility.
That changes everything. You don't need to know the future. You just need to find cheap ways to benefit if the future turns out to be unexpectedly good in some way.
That is the absolute core of optionality, and Taleb has this great quote about it.
Let's hear it.
Centrally, we just don't need to know what's going on when we buy cheaply.
Wow. So if the price is right, if the potential upside is huge and the cost is small, the why almost doesn't matter.
From an optionality perspective, yes. The structure is doing the work, not the prediction. The fragile person or system has no options. They are forced to endure the downside. The anti-fragile person actively seeks out these cheap options, these opportunities born from uncertainty. And often, the best options are found, not bought on an exchange.
Okay, so options allow us to benefit from uncertainty. But this chapter title, Lecturing Birds How to Fly, sounds critical.
Oh, it's deeply critical. This chapter attacks what Taleb calls the Soviet-Harvard illusion, or the problem of epiphenomena.
Soviet-Harvard illusion? What's that?
It's the widespread, often unquestioned belief that formal academic knowledge causes practical success and innovation. The idea that science leads to technology, which leads to applications, in a neat, linear path.
Like, first you have the theory, then you build the thing. Seems logical.
It seems logical, but Taleb argues it's often completely backward. He claims that much of technological progress and practical skill comes first from tinkering, from trial and error, from practitioners just messing around and finding things that work, then science comes along later to explain it.
So practice precedes theory.
Often, yes. The theory becomes an epiphenomenon, something that appears alongside the real cause or after it and gets mistaken for the cause.
Like thinking the rooster's crowing makes the sun rise.
Or as analogy, believing the ship's compass directs the ship, rather than just reflecting the direction the sailors are already steering it through their own skill and adjustments.
Okay, I see the illusion. Can you give some examples of this reversed causality?
Technology is full of them. Think about early aviation, or even things like the wheel. These weren't designed based on elaborate theories. They emerged from tinkering, accidents, practical problem solving by people taking risks. The physics came later to explain why the wings generated lift.
What about outside of technology? He mentioned wealth and education.
Yes, that's a provocative one. The common narrative is invest in education, and economic growth will follow.
Sounds right.
But Taleb flips it. He presents data suggesting that massive economic growth often happens first, driven by other factors, and then societies invest heavily in education. He points to places like South Korea or Taiwan after the 1960s. Their explosive growth came before their educational systems became world-class.
So education might be more of a consequence, or maybe something that stabilizes wealth, rather than the primary engine of creating it.
That's his argument. He suggests education might be more about creating polished dinner partners and stabilizing family income than driving fundamental economic breakthroughs.
And he applies this to economic crises, too. We blame greed.
Right. Everyone blames greed after a crash. But greed is timeless. It's always been around. So why are massive systemic financial crises a relatively modern phenomenon?
Because the system changed.
Exactly. It's not the greed itself, which is ancient, but the fragility of the modern, complex, interconnected financial system that allows that timeless greed to cause catastrophic damage. Blaming greed is another epiphenomenon. It distracts from the real cause, systemic fragility.
Okay, there's that quote again about technology.
Yes, it really captures this reversal. Technology is the result of anti-fragility, exploited by risk-takers in the form of tinkering and trial and error.
The significance being
That we need to respect the messy, bottom-up trial and error process much more. Our modern worship of top-down centralized plans, often designed by experts with no real skin in the game, might actually be stifling true innovation and building fragility. Progress thrives on small, local errors.
So, if progress comes from tinkering and trial and error, does that mean it's just random stumbling?
Not exactly. And that's the point of this chapter. Trial and error as rationality. It's not just random. It requires intelligence.
What kind of intelligence?
The intelligence to recognize a good outcome when you stumble upon it, that's the option part. And crucially, the rationality to know what to discard, what didn't work. It's about learning from failure.
Which connects to the idea of knowledge itself being fragile.
Yes, the fragility of knowledge. Taleb emphasizes that negative knowledge, knowing what is wrong, what doesn't work, is far more robust and reliable than positive knowledge, thinking, what is definitely right or what will work.
Because it's easier to disprove something than to prove it definitively.
Exactly. The classic black swan example again. Seeing one black swan instantly shatters the theory all swans are white. But seeing millions of white swans doesn't definitively prove the theory. The black one could still be out there.
So knowledge grows best by subtraction, by eliminating errors. This is the via negative idea we'll get to later.
Precisely. Disconfirmation is powerful. And this often leads to situations where practitioners, even uneducated ones, outperform theorists.
Like the traders pricing complex options.
Yeah. The anecdote about the economist worrying that traders didn't understand the sophisticated math, like Gersinoff's theorem, needed to price exotic derivatives.
But the traders were making money anyway.
They figured it out through practice, through heuristics, through costly trial and error. They developed an intuitive sense of how to handle these complex payoffs long before academics could fully model it. Their rationality was embedded in their actions and their ability to survive, not necessarily in their formal understanding.
They knew what not to do even if they couldn't write the textbook chapter on it.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, let's wrap up Book 4 on optionality.
The big idea is that optionality, having the asymmetrical right to benefit from uncertainty without the obligation to suffer the full downside, is everywhere. It's the engine of innovation.
And this progress comes from intelligent tinkering, not grand designs.
Right. Accepting small, bounded errors allows you to potentially capture massive, unpredictable gains from extremistan. Our cultural bias towards top-down science as the only source of progress is itself a fragility.
So the key takeaways for Book 4.
Let's see. Optionality. The ability to gain from disorder without predicting the future, thanks to asymmetry and rationality, knowing when to act.
Okay.
Real progress largely comes from bottom-up tinkering, trial and error, accepting small failures to find big wins.
Got it.
And negative knowledge, knowing what's wrong, what to avoid, is much more robust and reliable than positive knowledge.
All right, we've talked about individual strategies like the barbell and the power of optionality. Now, Book V seems to zoom out, looking at larger systems.
Exactly. It explores how fragility isn't just about individual items, but how it scales up, often non-linearly, within systems. The main idea here is that size, complexity, and enforced stability are major drivers of systemic fragility.
So bigger isn't necessarily better, and trying too hard to make things stable can backfire.
That's the core message. Fragility often increases disproportionately with size. Damage from shocks isn't linear, it's concave.
Concave, like a curve dipping downwards, meaning the impact gets worse faster.
Right. Think about convexity effects. A small system might handle a shock okay, but double the size of this system, and the same shock might cause more than double the damage.
Can you give an example? The traffic one is good.
Yeah, traffic congestion is a perfect example of concavity. Imagine a road that handles 100,000 cars smoothly.
Okay.
Now, compare two scenarios over 2 days. Scenario A, 100,000 cars each day. Smooth sailing. Scenario B, 90,000 cars one day, 110,000 the next. The average is the same, 100,000 cars per day.
But the experience is totally different.
Totally. That day with 110,000 cars creates massive nonlinear congestion. The total travel time over the 2 days in Scenario B is much, much worse than Scenario A, even though the average number of cars is identical. The system is fragile to the variation.
And this applies to bigger things, like banks.
Critically, Taleb contrasts one giant bank with, say, 10 smaller independent banks. Yep. If one massive bank has a Monsieur Careful, a rogue trader causing huge losses, the panic can spread, forcing fire sales, potentially taking down the whole system. Remember the $6 billion loss triggering a $70 billion fire sale?
Yeah.
Now, if each of the 10 small banks had its own independent micro-curfew, making proportional errors,
the damage would be contained.
It would likely be absorbed locally. The total loss across the system might be minimal, almost nothing compared to the single giant failure. Concentration and scale create this dangerous concavity to errors.
So size itself creates fragility, and trying to eliminate all the small problems makes it worse.
That leads straight to the idea of deprivation of volatility. Antifragile systems need stressors to stay healthy. Taking away their natural variations, often through well-intentioned interventions, actually harms them.
Like the forest fire analogy.
The classic forest fires analogy.
Yeah.
If you constantly suppress every small natural fire, what happens?
Flammable underbrush builds up. Dead wood accumulates.
Exactly. So when a fire eventually does start, maybe from lightning, it becomes an uncontrollable inferno. Suppression of small cleansing fires guarantees a future catastrophe.
And the same applies to economies or immune systems.
That's the argument. Long periods of artificial economic stability where governments try to eliminate every minor downturn, allow hidden risks and debts to accumulate silently beneath the surface. When the correction eventually comes, it's much more severe. Volatility isn't just noise, it's vital information, a necessary stressor for adaptation. Delaying crises is usually a bad idea.
Which puts modernity and centralization right in the crosshairs.
Absolutely. Taleb defines modernity in a way as the systematic smoothing of the world's jaggedness and the stifling of volatility and stressors. Think large, centralized governments, huge multinational corporations, top-down planning trying to impose order everywhere.
And he contrasts this with something like the Swiss model.
Yes. He argues Switzerland's remarkable stability and prosperity isn't despite, but because of its highly decentralized bottom-up structure. Power rests largely with the local cantons.
So there's lots of local squabbling, maybe, fights over small things.
Exactly. Constant, low-level political volatility at the municipal level, arguments about fountains or local taxes. Right. But this prevents the country from falling victim to grand, centralized utopian schemes that can cause massive systemic fragility when they inevitably go wrong. Local failures are contained, centralized failures can be nation-breaking.
So the attempts by central planners, like central bankers, trying to smooth the business cycle often lead to
iatrogenics. Harm caused by the healer, by the intervention itself.
Like Alan Greenspan trying to eliminate boom and bust.
Taleb uses Greenspan's era as a prime example. By keeping interest rates artificially low and intervening to prevent small corrections, the argument goes, he allowed enormous hidden risks, like in the housing market, to build up, leading directly to the mother of all fragilities in 2008. The cure was worse than the disease.
And trying to centralize things like national IT systems often fails spectacularly for the same reason. Too complex, too fragile to local errors.
Right. The dream of perfect, smooth, centralized control. The pin dropping in Whitehall being heard everywhere ignores the nonlinear risks of complexity and scale. It guarantees fragility.
It's ironic, then, for a system to be robust or anti-fragile overall, the parts often need to be fragile.
That's a crucial counterintuitive point. He calls it the transfer of fragility. Think about the restaurant business.
Okay. Individual restaurants fail all the time, right? It's a tough business.
Very fragile individually. Lots of churn, competition, failure. But the restaurant sector as a whole, it's incredibly anti-fragile.
How so?
Because the failure of individual restaurants is precisely what drives adaptation, innovation, and overall quality for the customer. Bad restaurants die off, good ones thrive and replicate. The fragility of the parts leads to the anti-fragility of the whole system.
Ah, I see. The problem arises when you try to prevent those individual failures.
Exactly. Or worse, when certain actors within the system, like bankers getting bailouts or executives with golden parachutes, are shielded from the consequences of their own risky decisions.
They get the upside, but they transfer the downside fragility to someone else.
To the taxpayers, to the system, to the collective. That breaks the necessary link between risk-taking and consequence and leads to systemic instability. Protecting the parts makes the whole system fragile.
Okay, Book V really hammers home the dangers of scale and artificial stability. Let's summarize.
The core argument. Fragility grows non-linearly with size and complexity. Trying to create perfect stability by suppressing natural volatility only hides risks and guarantees bigger, more catastrophic blow-ups later.
Systems need small failures to learn and adapt.
They absolutely do. Small failures are information.
So the key takeaways from Book V.
Number one, remember the phrase, no stability without volatility? Suppressing the small bumps ensures a giant crash later.
Okay.
Number two, small errors aren't just bad. They are necessary information for adaptation and improvement.
Right.
And number three, centralization and scale are inherently concave, meaning disproportionately fragile to errors and unforeseen events. Decentralized, smaller units are generally more robust.
All right, moving into Book 6. We've touched on this idea that negative knowledge, knowing what's wrong, is more reliable. This section seems to really build on that.
It does. The main goal here is to champion via negativa, the path of subtraction, as the most robust way to improve pretty much anything. Systems, health, knowledge, decision-making.
Via negativa, the negative way. So improvement by removal.
Exactly. Instead of always trying to add something new, a new rule, a new supplement, a new technology, via positiva, the more reliable path is often to subtract the harmful, the unnecessary, the things that demonstrably don't work or cause fragility.
Like don't smoke, rather than searching for the perfect antioxidant.
That's the spirit of it, yes. Avoiding known poisons is usually safer and more effective than adding complex, unproven solutions. Because our knowledge of what is harmful is generally much more solid than our knowledge of what is definitively beneficial, especially in complex systems like the human body or the economy. Hashtag learning to subtract. General concept.
And this ties into another key heuristic for judging what's likely to be robust, the Lindy effect.
Ah, yes, the Lindy effect. This is a fascinating observation about non-perishable things like ideas, technologies, books, maybe even some institutions.
What does it say?
It suggests that for these non-perishable things, their future life expectancy is proportional to their current age.
So the longer something has already been around,
the longer you can expect it to continue to be around. If a technology or an idea, like maybe the wheel or the concept of democracy, has survived for centuries or millennia, the Lindy effect implies it's likely to survive for many more. It's gained robustness through the filtering process of time.
Whereas a brand new technology or management fad
has a very short life expectancy, according to Lindy. It hasn't proven its ability to withstand the shocks and changes of time. So age becomes a marker of robustness for non-perishable things.
That really puts a different spin on our obsession with novelty. We should trust old things more.
For things that don't have a natural expiry date, yes. Taleb uses this to critique futurism. He points out that when you look back at old predictions of the future,
they mostly got it wrong.
Spectacularly wrong. But not just by missing one or two inventions like the internet. They mostly failed because almost everything they confidently predicted, the flying cars, the personal jetpacks, the meals in pill form, never actually happened.
Meanwhile, simpler, older technologies, books, bicycles, wine persist.
Exactly. They're Lindy-proof. The sophisticated, complex predictions failed. The ancient, simple stuff endured. Subtraction, just removing the failed predictions, would have been a better guide to the future than adding new ones.
Okay, so how does this subtractive approach apply to something really critical, like health and medicine? This chapter dives into that, right? Particularly the risks of intervention.
Yes, it heavily focuses on iatrogenics, harm caused by the healer. It questions the simplistic narrative that modern medicine is solely responsible for our increased lifespans.
How so? Isn't it obvious medicine helps us live longer?
It's more complex. While medicine is miraculous for acute conditions, fixing a broken leg, fighting a deadly infection, its benefits for chronic conditions or borderline cases are often less clear. And the potential for harm from intervention is significant and often hidden.
Hidden how?
There's an asymmetry. The benefits of an intervention are often immediate and visible. The tumor shrinks, the blood pressure drops. But the harms, side effects, complications, long-term consequences can be delayed, subtle, and harder to attribute directly to the treatment. Think of drugs like thalidomide, where the devastating harm only became apparent much later.
And he uses the example of screening, like mammograms, to illustrate this bias towards intervention.
Yes, it's a controversial but important point about measurement-driven bias. Studies might show fewer deaths from breast cancer in screened groups, which sounds great, but overall mortality might not improve or could even worsen because the screening detects many small, slow-growing tumors that would never have actually harmed the patient in their natural lifetime.
And finding those tumors leads to action.
It leads to interventions, surgery, radiation, chemotherapy, which are themselves toxic and carry risks. The doctor feels compelled to act on the measurement, on the image of the tumor.
Even if the tumor itself wasn't the real threat.
Exactly. It's a form of affirming the consequent fallacy. Just because serious cancers can kill doesn't mean every detected growth will kill. Treating harmless tumors aggressively can shorten life due to the toxicity of the treatment itself.
There's a quote about the doctor's compulsion here.
Yes. The doctor, seeing the tumor, cannot avoid doing something harmful, like surgery followed by radiation, chemotherapy, or both, that is more harmful than the tumor.
The significance is the bias. Once you see it, you feel you must treat it.
It highlights the danger of intervention bias driven by measurement, especially when the via negativa approach, watchful waiting, avoiding the toxic intervention for low-risk cases, might actually be safer and lead to a longer, healthier life overall.
So applying via negativa in health means?
It means focusing on subtraction first. What can you remove that is likely harmful?
Like processed foods, sugar, maybe even excessive information.
Precisely. The book advocates strongly for avoiding substances that haven't been time-tested by evolution, sugar being a prime example, and also avoiding the noise of constant news updates, excessive data, which he argues confuses our systems, much like too much sugar confuses our metabolism.
Back to basics, like that ancient medical school advice.
The Salerno School of Medicine. Joyful mood, rest, and scant nourishment. Moderata dieta. Simple, subtractive, focused on avoiding harm.
And this even applies to things like eating patterns or exercise.
Yes, the idea of convexity and consumption. Our bodies likely evolved to handle and maybe even benefit from randomness in food availability periods of fasting followed by feasting. So the modern pattern of 3 steady meals a day might not be optimal. It removes that natural, beneficial volatility.
We might be antifragile to occasional hunger?
Potentially. And similarly, we benefit greatly from low-level, non-strenuous physical activity like walking, convex benefits. But optimizing by removing all effort through cars and elevators might actually be subtly harmful by depriving us of necessary stimulus.
So less can definitely be more. Let's sum up Book 6.
The main argument is clear. Subtraction via negativa is the most robust path to improvement. Prioritize avoiding known harms and fragilities, especially in complex modern systems prone to iatrogenics. Be skeptical of adding complexity via positiva unless the benefits are overwhelmingly clear and time-tested.
Key takeaways
From Book 6. Negative knowledge, knowing what to avoid, what's wrong, is the most robust and reliable form of knowledge.
Right?
Use the Lindy effect as a filter. Trust things, ideas, technologies that have survived the test of time more than novelties.
Okay.
The burden of proof should always fall on those proposing interventions or disrupting natural long-standing systems. They need to show their via positiva approach is safe, not just potentially effective.
Okay, we've covered fragility, asymmetry, optionality, scale, and subtraction. Book 7 brings it all together with a sharp focus on ethics and accountability.
Yes, this is where the rubber really hits the road, ethically speaking. If antifragility involves gaining from volatility and disorder, the crucial question becomes, who benefits and who pays the price when things go wrong? This section is all about skin in the game.
Having skin in the game meaning you have something personal at stake.
Exactly. You share in the consequences of your actions or decisions, both good and bad. Taleb argues this is not just economically efficient, but a fundamental requirement for ethical and stable systems.
And the core ethical rule stems from this.
The chief ethical rule is simple and powerful. Thou shalt not have anti-fragility at the expense of the fragility of others.
So you shouldn't be able to structure things so you get the upside from volatility while someone else gets stuck with the downside when it blows up.
Precisely. And yet, he argues this violation is rampant in modern society, particularly among certain types of professionals he labels fragilistas.
Fragilistas. Who are they?
Think academics who give policy advice, consultants, commentators, bureaucrats, central bankers, people who often benefit in terms of reputation, influence, or future jobs if their advice turns out well.
But suffer no personal consequences if it turns out terribly.
Exactly. They have optionality, but they've transferred the negative side, the fragility, to others, to the public, the taxpayers, the people actually affected by their decisions. They get the upside, promotions, book deals, acclaim, but are shielded from the downside. They lack skin in the game.
And this ties into the classic agency problem.
It's a prime example, especially visible in finance. Think about bankers or CEOs whose compensation is heavily skewed towards short-term gains, bonuses based on quarterly profits.
They have a huge incentive to take big risks for that immediate upside.
A massive incentive. And if those risks blow up down the line, well, there are usually no negative bonuses. Their personal net worth is often protected. The losses get socialized, covered by bailouts or absorbed by shareholders or the wider economy.
So they have huge upside, but limited or no personal downside. That's not capitalism, is it?
Taleb argues vehemently it is not true capitalism. It's a rigged game, an unethical transfer of fragility from the decision maker to the collective.
And this lack of consequence enables certain behaviors, like pretending you predicted a disaster after it happened.
The Stiglitz syndrome, as he calls it, named after the economist Joseph Stiglitz, though Taleb applies the critique more broadly. It's the tendency for experts, after a black swan event like a market crash, to dig up some obscure, perhaps contradictory past statement they made and claim they predicted it all along.
Because there's no penalty for all the other times they were wrong.
Exactly. Without skin in the game, without a cost for being wrong, talk is cheap. You can always find something you said that vaguely fits the outcome and construct a narrative of foresight. It's reputation management enabled by a lack of accountability.
So how do you enforce accountability? He brings up Hammurabi's law.
Yes, the ancient Babylonian code. The famous example. Hammurabi's law stipulated that if a builder builds a house and it collapses and kills the owner, the builder is put to death.
Wow, that's extreme skin in the game.
It's extreme, yes. But Taleb's point isn't necessarily about the severity of the punishment. It's about the principle of direct, severe accountability for hidden risks transferred to others. It wasn't just punishment. It was a mechanism to ensure builders didn't cut corners in ways the owner couldn't see, thereby making the whole system of construction more robust.
It aligns the builder's interests perfectly with the owner's survival.
It forces the person with the knowledge and control, the builder, to bear the ultimate consequence of catastrophic failure. Now, he clarifies this likely applied more to hidden flaws, not necessarily every single accident or visible risk the owner might accept.
So it's about preventing the hidden transfer of fragility.
Yes. And this contrast between just talking and actually bearing consequences is illustrated by the story of the poet.
Al-Mutanabbi.
Al-Mutanabbi, the great Arab poet, known for his incredible arrogance and poems boasting of immense courage. The story goes he was ambushed by bandits and initially tried to flee. His slave supposedly reminded him of his own verses. You wrote about bravery, master. Forced by his own words, his own talk, he turned back to fight and was killed.
Let's hear that boastful quote again.
In one poem, he boasts with incredible arrogance. He is followed by the whole world, but does not follow anyone.
The significance of his death.
It's the ultimate skin-in-the-game moment. His words, his reputation, his claims of courage forced him into an action whose cost he ultimately had to bear himself. It's a stark reminder to judge people by their actions and their exposure to consequences, not just their rhetoric, especially when they aren't risking anything themselves.
And this lack of skin in the game has major political implications too, especially regarding interventionism.
Definitely. He argues that leaders or nations intervening in complex foreign systems trying to stabilize them, often based on flawed academic models, usually end up creating more instability and chaos. He uses the 2003 invasion of Iraq as a key example.
Because the interveners didn't fully understand the system and weren't bearing the direct personal costs of the resulting chaos.
Right. The consequences were unpredictable due to the system's complexity, and the decision-makers were largely insulated from the horrific downstream effects suffered by the local population and even their own soldiers. It was, in Taleb's framing, epistemologically irresponsible intervention without skin in the game, except perhaps with the soldiers on the ground.
Okay, so the ethical and practical core of Book 7 is clear.
It's that robust, ethical, and functional systems require skin in the game. Decision makers need to be exposed to the downside of their decisions, not just the potential upside.
The transfer of fragility from well-positioned elites to the broader public is fundamentally unethical and destabilizing.
It's the core violation, leading inevitably to systemic blowups.
Let's list the key takeaways for this final book.
From Book 7, the core ethical rule. Don't achieve your own anti-fragility by making others fragile.
Crucial.
The absence of penalty for error, lack of skin in the game, incentivizes risk-hiding and unaccountable behavior, like the Stiglitz syndrome. Judge people and systems based on actions, track records, and exposure to consequences, not just words or credentials. True accountability requires skin in the game. #tag final recap.
Wow. Okay, that was a deep dive into Antifragile. It really challenges so many assumptions about how the world works, how we should make decisions, how we should structure things.
It absolutely does. Fundamentally, it's trying to give us a new framework for navigating a world we have to admit is dominated by uncertainty, unpredictable shocks by black swans.
And the goal isn't to get better at predicting those shocks.
No, the goal is to shift our focus entirely. Stop trying to predict, start trying to position ourselves, our finances, our careers, our health, our systems, so that we actually benefit from the inherent disorder and volatility of the world rather than being victims of it.
Which requires embracing that core idea of asymmetry.
Keeping the upside, limiting the downside. That's the heart of anti-fragility.
So let's quickly recap the main arguments one last time.
Sure. First, anti-fragility itself. It's the true opposite of fragility, things that get stronger when stressed or shocked.
Second, the practical strategy. The barbell. Minimize ruinous downside risk with extreme safety, then pursue massive upside potential with contained, aggressive bets. Avoid the fragile middle.
Third, optionality and tinkering. Real innovation and progress often come from bottom-up trial and error, exploiting asymmetry, not from top-down plans or lecturing birds how to fly.
Fourth, scale and stability. Modernity's obsession with size, centralization, and smoothing out volatility actually creates hidden systemic fragilities that lead to bigger crashes later. Remember, no stability without volatility.
And finally, ethics and accountability. Robust and fair systems demand skin in the game. Those who benefit from risks must also be exposed to their potential downsides. Transferring fragility is the core ethical problem.
It all weaves together into a really cohesive, if challenging, worldview.
It definitely does.
Okay, as we wrap up, let's leave our listeners with that final provocative thought to chew on.
Right, so consider this. We're drowning in data today, right? Big data, endless variables, constant streams of information.
Yeah, information overload is real.
But Taleb warns about the fooled by data effect. More data doesn't necessarily mean more signal. It often just means more noise, more spurious correlations, more temptation to overanalyze and overintervene in systems we don't fully understand.
Leading to more iatrogenics, more harm caused by trying to fix things based on noisy data.
Exactly. Too much data, like too much sugar, can confuse our natural systems. So perhaps the truly anti-fragile approach in this information age is via negativa subtraction. Meaning actively rationing the information we consume, filtering aggressively, trusting time-tested heuristics and the Lindy effect more than the latest headline or dataset, focusing intensely on avoiding the known harms and fragilities rather than constantly searching for the next complex optimization. Maybe less information, carefully chosen, is the smarter way to navigate.
Embrace ignorance, manage exposure. That's a powerful takeaway.
It really is. Structure yourself so that when the unexpected happens, you're the one who says thank you to volatility, not the one asking, what hit me?
Thanks for tuning in to the Future of Us Bookcast. We hope you found inspiration in these ideas. Don't forget to subscribe and share. Together, we're co-creating the world of tomorrow.